Hey everybody, welcome back live at Drew's House Joppa Afternoon Drive. Hope you're all doing well. Coming to you from our Newburyport studios today. Our guest, first time on the show, Ethan Baird. He is the Executive Director of the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance. We just became fast friends, met him just recently, and he's a local boy too. Lives right, we'll get into it all. Ethan, welcome to the show, my friend.
I think it's really great being here. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I already know the answer to this because I was going to ask you, did you find the place okay? But actually, no, you went to the coffee shop down the street.
It was probably just the caffeine calling, you know.
Did you Did you stop?
I was about to, but I was like, no, I don't want to be late.
Gotta get there. Very good.
It's like being late for the first date. Second date, maybe, but first date, you really shouldn't do that.
Fair enough. On the way out, you can go to. It's always going to be
fair enough.
That's funny. Well, how you been, man?
I'm good. I'm good. I had a wonderful weekend along with you.
We did. We met actually at the Folk Americana Hall of Fame induction ceremony over at the Ernie Bach, the Bach Center Wayne Theater, and it was just a great night.
It was really an amazing experience overall. Just for context, this is one of the first times that we really got to see representatives from all of these families in the greater folk Americana roots scene.
Seeger,
yeah,
Guthrie,
Leadbelly, Richie Havens,
John Prine.
Oh yeah, it was just one of those. I as someone that grew up in the scene, I was just sort of sitting there. What I liked is I got to go there just to help out. So I really just got to sort of play the usher, walking people around. So no one stopped and questioned the sort of like, oh, you're here for NERFA, so you must be doing XYZ. And I was no, I'm just walking to people to interviews. It was,
It was great. Joan Baez in the house.
I got to get her drinks and hang out. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
It's a good story, right?
Yeah.
How about that? So Ethan, let's start. First of all, let's start with, I think there's a lot of people that hear the title and they go, oh, that's interesting. What exactly is that? So why don't you explain exactly what you do as Executive Director of the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance?
Certainly. So my job, I think in an overall perspective, what NERFA, the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance, is meant for is really to provide services for musicians, presenters, music professionals, anyone really looking to build a life in the arts. It's our job to find ways to make that easier, and in particular, just try to help them out in a field that changes and evolves so quickly that if you want your job to be making music, it's really hard to keep up with everything else.
Yeah, we got a lot of local musicians. Obviously, that's the nature of this show. Is we have a lot of these local musicians that come in here and play, and you just talked to one of them out there. There's always one or two hanging around. And what is you see as what are you hearing back as the biggest problem for the local music acts trying to make a living these days?
And I make this joke, and no one's ever laughed at it. It's not going to stop me from making the joke, but I really refer to it as the haberdashery of responsibilities, meaning every artist I know is responsible for so many hats. We could literally open our own store, and they change constantly. So, it used to be you had to know how to get a crowd going. You had to be a good performer. You had to be a good songwriter most of the time. And you had to be a good musician. You had to know your instrument. Those were the three primary sort of concerns. And you had to, keep a mailing list, and you had to follow up, and you had to be a good sort of business entrepreneur in general. But now you need to have a level of booking. There aren't really easy access to booking tours like Legs that really existed in the 90s, 80s, and before. Now it is more of a first come, first serve in a lot of situations. It's just very difficult to keep track of all that stuff. Even the art of making music, you used to tour to sell records because that's where a lot of the money came. Records exist, discs exist, but they're not really a primary source of income anymore.
We were just saying we don't even have CD players in our cars anymore.
I don't have a CD player in my car, and my car is 7 or 8 years old.
Same.
So it's one of those things where we eliminated half of the income that existed because when I was a traveling musician for a while, and we made half our money on the gig and half of our money on selling things at the gig. So that's
merchandise
really
included, like sweatshirts and all that stuff. I mean, that's still a big part of this, right? I do see a lot of, especially going to a lot of these smaller, clubs or listening rooms. I see almost like clockwork. The artist finishes the set and sprints over to the merch show, and
and it's, that stuff's always existed to an extent, but the fact of the matter is the merch situation now is just so much different, because when it was a record, so I'm going to get nerdy for a second.
No, good.
A record, like what it physically costs to press a record. Most of us, when we printed records in the 90s and aughts, we printed 1,000 records, because basically, little known secret, you could buy 500. The facility would actually print 1,000 and throw 500 out.
Oh, wow.
So the cost between 500 and 1,000 was next to nothing, because they were making them anyway.
Yeah.
But it basically meant the cost of printing each CD was about $1, and you were selling them for 15. So great margin, really great margin. If you're selling a sweatshirt, you're probably buying it for 12 and you're selling it for maybe 20 or something like that. It's giant and it's big and it's fluffy, and you have to have it in 5 sizes and perhaps different gender cuts. And
Yeah.
it's just
So that is a big, that I had never really thought about, because you do see, I always thought it was a nice way to give back to an artist, go out there, and it is, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
buying stuff, and you get to wear it out there. It's kind of like a walking billboard. It's a nice way to support, but you're right, those margins just aren't there.
No, and they're harder to upkeep. The amount of money that you have to put out the door just to get them is different. The amount of space they take up. I still have giant boxes of CDs in my basement. I don't have to worry about it being wet down there or this, that, the other thing. CDs are wrapped in plastic. They're fine. If I put a bunch of sweatshirts downstairs in a humid basement, it's not going to go too well.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's that. Okay. So there's
the logistics of merchandising.
But the point is made, though, that you're right. Those 3 components that used to be aren't. There's this whole other side of it now. It's this is, I guess, the business of it, you would say.
Yeah.
Never mind the social media. I think that is an always changing game, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Trying to stay up with, and I don't know, do you find, are younger people better at social media? I would imagine that answer is yes, but younger musicians?
Certainly. And I think the interesting thing is just sort of generational representation in social media, because you've got Facebook, that's a very different generation than Twitter or X or whatever it's called now.
Yeah.
Which is slightly different than Instagram, which is very different than TikTok. And each one of them has different things that work on them and things that don't, even if the format looks the same.
Yep.
And that also brings in the entire concept of video. Artists didn't really, unless you were on MTV, 25 years ago, video wasn't something an artist had to think about now. And now I know a lot of artists that are investing in video more than CD production.
Yeah.
Which is a weird dichotomy. It's like a weird change.
Well, just because they can roll it out and get their music out there on these social medias. That makes sense to me, actually. It's got a whole little, I know, it's like a weird, MTV was such it's such a weird point in time, because I remember music videos, and then we went through a time period where kids were kind of like, wait, I'm sorry, there was a television station that was designed to play, what are you talking about? They're like, oh, that's the station that the Real Housewives show is on, okay. Or whatever it is. But
the thing that invented reality television,
but I mean, it's weird. It's just an ever-changing landscape. It is amazing. But you know what I do find, though, when I come in here, because, I have plenty of young artists on, but I have plenty of older guys that have been, touring for 30 years and are still doing it great. A lot of these the older artists that are on the older side, though, are completely willing to dive into it.
Yeah.
They're like, I'm trying, working the Instagram, this, I'm trying to see and try to keep up, and just, it's a weird, they're all just wired to stay with it. Maybe it's because it's always been a changing landscape. Yeah. I don't know. But
I think, it's one of the interesting things, because when we talk about age, I think people get caught up on the number of age, but it's really the mentality of age. And to your point, there are artists in their 60s that could run rings around me with understanding what's going on a particular side of the business, because they're just in it. And there are 25-year-olds that have decided, I've learned everything I need to learn. I'm not going to learn no more. So from that perspective, what I love is when you get the sides of the generations, when you get the 55 to 60-year-old artist picking up the 20 to 25-year-old artist, and they start working together. That's usually when we see really wonderful things occur.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah, that's when your eyes light up just talking about that. That's fantastic. Now, what is your territory again? You were talking about this a little bit off the air, but
we essentially cover in Canada, Ontario, through the Maritimes and north, down to Northern Virginia. So it's this very wide, and in my opinion, it is the the golden territory for artists, because we're the territory, and I think as a New Englander, we don't think about this all that often. But if you're from the Midwest, if you tour in Chicago and you want to go to another major city, that is a long drive.
Yes.
If you're in Boston and you want to go to another city, you're an hour and a half from Portland, New Hampshire. You're an hour from Portsmouth.
Portland, Maine.
Portland, Maine. Sorry,
Yeah.
I always get those mixed up.
Yeah.
You're an hour from Rhode Island. You're an hour from Western Mass. Northampton has that great music scene.
Yeah.
It's an area where you can pick a spot and play 5 different major locations in 5 days.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense to me too. I remember I had an artist in here from the Midwestern guy that was doing the touring thing through here, and he's trying to, well planned,
Yeah.
but he is in a band, solo artist, came through here, did up all the cities around here, was driving around each city night to night, would play and then leave that night. And, he said some of the hotel rooms, but in others, a lot of times I'll end up meeting a family that was a really big fan or whatever, and like where are you staying? Oh, don't drive that far. Don't drive to the next city. Come crash with us tonight, right?
Yep.
I sleep on a lot of fans' couches. Let's put it that way.
No, I'll be honest. I ran a folk trio for about 15 years, and in the entirety of that time, I think we paid for a hotel room maybe 3 times.
Really?
Because of both the fan base, which is always wonderful when that happens. Small venues where volunteers sort of are set to do that, but also the fact that we're usually going to cities where we have friends who are musicians there, and it's this trade.
Yeah, return the favor when they come back through. Yeah, that sort of thing.
I have artists that crash at my place virtually every other week.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool though. I mean, I
love it.
I would love that. I mean, maybe it's not for everybody, but
in fairness, I live alone. The times where I haven't lived alone, that wasn't necessarily always seen as a feature of living with me.
Sure.
But
I get it. Yeah, but no, that's I understand how that life works. I think that's probably it's very like, for me, it's very like rock star-esque. I mean, that's awesome. You get to bounce around city to city and like your friends helping you out. I think it's cool. I mean, I'm sure maybe for the artist sometimes it's like, see, the thing is, I'd rather be making a little bit more on this trip so that I wouldn't have to do all that. I'm sure that's probably playing in too. Do we pay our artists enough out there in general? And the biggest general question in the world, I know, but how do you feel about the scene of like the live music scene right now? All these big acts and Taylor Swift, Bruce Springsteen, you got to take out a mortgage to pay for a ticket these days, it seems. There's a divide, I think.
There's a huge divide, but let's also be clear, when you're talking about Bruce Springsteen and Taylor Swift, they're not making all of that money off the tickets. It's Ticketmaster usually making the money off those tickets.
This is like 30 years we've been having this fight, right?
Absolutely. And I'm not throwing stones when I say this, but there are events that occur with these acts that have never sold a ticket that costs more than $40, and all of a sudden they're in a Ticketmaster location and they're surge pricing, and tickets are going for $800 or $1,000. Like, we're seeing that.
Yeah.
And that's not going to the artist. That's going to some middleman that found a way to get you to pay them.
Exactly. And this whole Ticketmaster surge pricing thing, did they steal that from Uber and Lyft or something?
They've been doing it for a while. I don't know who came up with it first. There's probably a copyright trademark involved.
Sure. But there's I was telling people, it was not that long ago, and I guess you start to sound a little bit like an old man when you say this sort of stuff, but like, it wasn't, I remember going to shows within the last, like, just before COVID, 7, 8 years ago. Yeah. I'm a big Springsteen guy, so like, those tickets never went over $100. Like, he made it a point to keep, at one point it was 75, then it went to 90, maybe it went to 115, but like, it was reasonable. Coming out of COVID, suddenly it's like, wait a second, there's secondhand tickets on Ticketmaster. But that is just scalping by Ticketmaster, right?
Yes.
It's
and part of it is the monopoly that some of these places have over venues. They basically say,
yes,
hey, we'll sell your tickets, but we're the only people that are allowed to sell your tickets, and therefore they get to dictate the price.
Right.
What you say is seen, and when you say that you were able to see a Springsteen concert for like $100 10 years ago, it's because depending on the size of the venue, there were times that the artist basically just bought out the venue and sell the tickets themselves. Pearl Jam, notoriously famous for doing that very early in the process.
Well, because they fought, and I guess you would say lost because, that's what has happened. But, well, Zach Bryan tried to do that too, the, country artist that's huge right now. He took a stand, he even wrote a song about Ticketmaster, I think, that was not too flattering. But he played, I remember he's one of the biggest things out there right now as far as ticket selling goes. And there was a show in Worcester. My cousin actually took me to it. And you could only buy, it's such in demand that you could only buy 2 tickets. There were waiting lists and fan sites. So you could just tell outside the place, I knew right away, this place is going to be jam-packed. And it's probably one of the toughest tickets you've seen. And the deal was he was playing Worcester because that was not one of those venues that Ticketmaster had the right over. And then now I see him playing all these places, and he eventually just came out and said, I fought a battle and I lost. Yeah. And he was a defeated. I was like, that's so hard to listen to this big artist just feel defeated from this. Yeah.
And in fairness, I kind of redirected your conversation in that direction. You asked me a general question, are artists making enough today? Yeah. The answer is no. The answer really, the goal of my organization is to make it easier and provide support for people that are trying to make a living in the arts. And my personal goal, and I've been in the scene for 30 years, my personal goal is just to make it, I don't think it will ever be easy to make a living in the arts, but it should be easier. It's just too hard now. Yeah. And, unless you are the size of a Taylor Swift or, that level of you can sell out 3,000. If you're playing the Wang Center or the equivalent of the Wang Center 4 or 5 nights a week, you're probably doing okay. Yes. But as you get below that, and even when you get to people that are selling out 500, 600 person theaters regularly, it's you now are dealing with having to have a crew that sets that stuff up and comes with you, and that's the thing to sort of keep in mind, that every part of the economy there's an entire microcosm that is created that surrounds it.
That's a good thought. So every few hundred people you got. So the Firehouse down the street here is a lovely theater. It's 200. Yep. So you make that jump to the Orpheum or the Wayne, that's probably about the same, right? Just thinking, I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but say those size, you're probably right. Those are maybe slightly bigger artists, but a whole new thing. Just those few hundred seats, more crew, more this, more that. Yeah.
It's you can really look at sort of the different scopes of venues and the technical expertise that's required to make a show run in those spaces, and what a show needs to look like changes, and that in and of itself is pretty fascinating. That being said, when you're talking about folk roots and Americana, you're talking about a style of music that very often is played in people's houses, is played in fire, in campfire situations. So there is everything from communities, wonderful open mic communities that spring up and foster just a love of the art form without the economics really being built into it. Yep. Straight up to people who are trying to make it their primary form of income, and that. Every step in that changes the game. No doubt. Wow, crazy. Ethan Baird joining us. First time on the show. I'm learning a lot about his very fascinating job here. It really is. I find it to be incredibly interesting. We should give your title again, too. Executive Director of the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance, and just a huge territory. I brought up the territory, too, because so many artists I've heard, especially I think maybe not late 90s, they were saying that was I used to kind of tour that was my tour. We would go down there, and a lot of times they'd I guess probably think to people sleeping at your house, maybe they would switch with bands in a different location, and here, you guys come up, play our little joints for a little while, we'll go play yours. And that was kind of touring for a lot of these bands, especially the smaller variety 20 years ago. That's life is a little bit more difficult in that regard, right? Yeah, it's yes and no. I mean, what I would say is organizations like mine, organizations like NERFA, when I first got involved in it, and I went to my very first NERFA, which was about 15 years ago, my first set, when I walked in the door, I think a lot of people walk into those situations being like, I'm going to walk out of here with a theater gig. I walked in there with I want to meet a bunch of musicians that vibe with what I'm doing from different territories and figure out ways to work on show swaps. Yeah. And that's what we did. And that got us to Philly, that got us to New York. That really took us from being a Boston-based band into bands that were anywhere from Maine to Virginia on a given week. And that still exists. There's still the opportunity to do that, but it is definitely networking that drives that possibility.
Yeah. So just and a whole other thing for the artist to keep an eye on, right? Is I mean, it's cool though. It's music at its roots, really, when you think about it, right? Like, it's a great band. You should go see them. It's I don't know. It's completely different. When you think to the next 5-10 years, what do you see as the biggest changes within the industry? Can you even predict in this industry, or is that consistently moving anyway?
I'm going to make a guess, but I don't think I'm going to be any more right than people in the 70s were right when they talked about the Jetsons being what the future was going to be like in 30 years.
Okay.
What I will see, what we're seeing predominantly from a fiscal perspective, is money is made almost exclusively through the cult of personality, meaning like your shows are great to get people on board and become fans, but it's through leveraging tools like Patreon. It's through creating a interest in you, the human being, not necessarily the art that you're creating, is really what's driving the economic reality of being able to make it work. And that is so diametrically opposed to what it was like as an artist 30 years ago, where you could be a power introvert. Some of my favorite artists growing up are the most introverted people in the world. Yeah. And now I just see that as being a much harder thing for artists to work through. Yeah.
No, right. I mean, some of the best of all time. You hear stories about, and I couldn't believe that voice that came out of that person. You
Absolutely.
Know, it's crazy. I want to spend a minute on this, because I remember probably when I first started this show, which was probably like 8 years ago in this variety now, artists would come in here and be like, what's really, what I'm almost strictly doing right now is I'm doing house concerts. And I said, I was naive. I said, what? and they said, no, the house concerts, like I go and, the 30 people, they really like me and they bring their friends together who really like me from that area. And I play their nice living room and there's a cool balcony and it's nice and intimate and they really take care of me. And I said, that's fascinating. And then I think this kind of took off. It's a little bit in the weeds, but it also kind of took off at the same time. Explain the house concerts thing to me.
House concerts really became the bread and butter of artists, and particularly how you made a tour work, because you could get a good show if you were good at what you did. You could find a good venue for like a Friday or Saturday night. But if you were trying to play, if you're from Boston, you want to get down to DC to play some shows, going straight from Boston to DC on a Friday. Economically, how does that work? Like, how much do you need to make now, because you're just going straight down, straight back? House shows are the thing that you could find people that would do a house show on a Thursday night or on a Sunday afternoon. So it really spread the tour. And even if you had one as a fill-in date for a Friday or Saturday, it gave you that buffer where you are not only making money, but one of the great things about house shows is most of the time with house shows, you as the artist aren't the one who's responsible for getting the audience in. It's the person who is running the show that is bringing an audience to you.
Get your crew together, yeah.
Huge gift for an artist.
Yeah.
To all of a sudden have 30 people who are fundamentally predisposed to like who you are because their friend said, you're going to love these guys, and I promise so much, I'm inviting you into my house to hang.
Yeah. And I take it there's probably no baseball game on while this is going on.
Generally not. And that's, when you talk about gigs, there's sort of that other dichotomy in really any live music thing, which is the concept of a listening room venue or a listening space where you're going specifically for the purpose of listening to the artist, or you're going as background, where, there's a game on in the corner, or it's a bar and people are playing billiards.
Or right over the artist's head.
Well,
I have a few pet peeves.
I have mixed feelings about it being right over the artist's head, because part of me says, that stinks, but the other part of me says, well, it's better than putting it on the opposite wall where you're now playing to a crowd that's mainly watching the game and you're behind them. It's a psychological defeat in that particular scenario.
That's all right. I'll think about that next time I get angry. But I have people that come in here who are just amazing, and I know they're great. And there is that fine line in music, whether just catch a break here, but people that will come in here that are just, and I will tend to go out and see them in real life. And I remember one real specific instance just happened recently. And the bar that they were playing at was it was chatty for one, and the World Cup from it's not World Cup season. The World Cup from the last World Cup was on at this Irish bar, and I'm like, it's not even a live sporting event. Can we turn the damn TVs off? It is distracting. People just don't if people were to just pay attention, had nothing. There's no way that you would not be at least intrigued. I don't care if it's not your thing, but you have to respect the musicianship. It's incredible.
I agree. Mostly I agree.
Yeah.
That being said, I talked earlier about, or I think I talked earlier about sort of the primary responsibilities of the artist if you go to the core of it.
Yeah.
Part of it is musicianship. Part of it is songwriting, but the other part is performance. And part of being a good performer is earning that attention.
Sure.
And now if you're put in a situation where you're behind the 8 ball, yeah, that's not great.
Yeah.
But there are performers out there that will, I've been in those bars and I've watched performers absolutely turn the entire room around.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough once or twice to be the guy that did that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's my favorite thing in the world, but it's a challenge.
It certainly is, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And I mean, I've heard other artists talk about, some of those nights you realize you're not the show. Maybe it's a Bruins playoff and a Celtics playoff at the same time. You know what? You kind of do have to respect that and take a back seat and just I work on my craft. I play for who's listening. And then I've heard that example too, which, I understand. Maybe the person doesn't want to be Prince and jump on the bar and but that night. But it's a fascinating thing to think about. Talk about your, I know this is your job as executive director of the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance, and you're kind of full-time on that right now, but you were quite the musician. Talk about that career for a little bit.
Yeah, so I've been involved in the folk community since I was 13, and a pretty girl invited me to a concert and didn't tell me that it was in a church coffee house, and I got there and I saw a guy, wonderful musician who's still out there and doing fantastic work, guy named Ellis Paul, and I fell in love with the idea of being able to communicate in that way, and I fell sort of deep into it. Have a degree in music and audio engineering. Did music. Never really wanted to be the single singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
So I started a band with some college friends and truly wonderful people, and we made it sort of 15 straight years. The name of the band was Pesky J. Nixon, which was our own little clever shout out to the Boston Red Sox. We picked our favorite 3 Red Sox players, and we just mashed it together.
All right. Whose was yours?
Pesky, Johnny Pesky.
Old school, very good.
Yeah. I'll be honest. As much as I like Johnny Pesky, the name also just was I want that. That's gonna work.
Sure.
But yeah, and had a fantastic time and did things that as someone. That I never wanted to pursue it as a sole means of income. It just was never in the card. It's never something I really wanted to do, but got to play main stages at major festivals on the East Coast and got to play all of these rooms that were I dreamed about as a kid. So it was a wonderful experience.
Cool. That's fantastic. Do you, is there, I mean, you get similar rewards doing the work you're doing now, fighting for those artists. Is it just as rewarding sometimes when you get something right in today's job as maybe having a great set at a major festival?
Honestly, yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. One of our things that we became really well known for was as soon as sort of we made it rung up the ladder as far as opportunity, we'd do our best to find the excellent artists that had been on the level we were that we thought needed recognition, and we'd pull them right up with us. I grew up on a boat, so the entire rising tide, cliche is really part of my being, but the joy of being able to not necessarily just myself have that recognition, although those were really cool moments.
Yeah,
being able to put an artist that I think is worthwhile in front of an audience and just see that reaction, there's something really special about it. I feel very lucky to do it.
That stuff still happens every day too. And it rubs off better on that artist who is climbing that ladder. As I remember, I think it was Portland last maybe a couple summers ago, where Chad Stokes is the lead singer of Dispatch, and it was actually a Dispatch show. Yeah, that's what it was, a Dispatch show, and the opening act had been cut by rain. I remember. It just downpoured and like, you know, they ended up 20 minutes instead of 40 or whatever it is. Yeah. And Chad knew it and said, you know, let's bring that band back out there. We're going to do a couple there. So, and like just gave him another couple songs just because, and I just thought that was the coolest moment. And like, yeah, I'm sure, you know, maybe, oh no, you know, come on, we're going to cut a Dispatch song. But it's, for me, it's like, that's awesome. That's what I love about that artist, is that he would do something like that, you know?
And for those artists that he did that for, like that likely is going to be a story that they tell for the rest of their existence.
Yeah.
And should that magical levee break and all of a sudden they are the headliners, the story they're going to tell about the people that, like, how can you not feel good about being able to be part of that story as an enabler, as the person that's trying to help people out? You know, one of our big realizations is, you know, I mentioned people focusing on video now almost more than making records to a certain extent. We recognize that was a very hard thing for artists, because like everyone's got a cell phone. We all technically have video, but that's what a lot of artists were doing. They're just sort of holding a cell phone up. The number of, when COVID started, the number of streaming concerts where I could count nose hairs because it was a phone sitting on a pillow staring up. You know, so we invested this year in one of the opportunities of artists that come to the conference. Was we had sort of a formal showcase opportunity, but the next rung, we had a professional cinematographer, and we set up a set, and we had 35 artists get 15-minute long, essentially press kit videos that they could send to bookers to show, this is how good I can look and sound. Wow. And that, like, the artists, as you know, and every month we're rolling more out. We've taken all of those, and we're pretty much every week we're releasing a new video. And the artists that we've released videos for, the number of them that have come back and been like, yeah, I've gotten 3 major gigs from places that wouldn't call me back before. Like that to me,
that's impact.
Yeah, I feel good. I don't need to be the guy on stage. I can be the guy making sure that the people on stage are able to pay rent. That makes me feel pretty damn good.
It's an awesome answer to that question. Very good. Ethan Baird, this has been a pleasure, man. Executive Director of the Northeastern Regional Folk Alliance, NERFA. I'm trying to get used to saying that, which is it does kind of ring off the tongue. It's easy, but like, that's the point, right, Drew? Tell people where they can learn more if they have questions. Go to social media or whatever.
Certainly, I'd say the 2 places I'd love for you to go to. One primarily would be the website itself, nerfa.org, nerfa.org, or go to YouTube and look us up, and you can see all those videos I was just talking about, and a bunch of educational programs that we did straight through COVID, and that's really been a big part of who we are now.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you for fighting all these artists. I know you got some thank yous from actual artists right out the door. It probably happens to you on a daily basis, but that's always a cool thing. And you're a Newbury boy, so you're right around. We'll be seeing a lot of each other now. That we're fast friends. Love it.
Looking forward to it.
Cool, man. Thanks for coming in. We appreciate you. Thanks to Maeve Power directing the show today. Ryan Rothberg, Maya Gassman, Sarah Hayden, the boss. They all do the hard work as I get to talk to interesting people like Ethan all day. So we appreciate you guys very much. That'll do it. We'll see you all next time. All right, live at Drew's house, Joppa Afternoon Drive. Peace.